Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Question from Senator Johnson for the President's Counsel. If House managers were certain it would take months to litigate a subpoena for John Bolton, why shouldn't the Senate assume lengthy litigation and make the same decision as the House made, reject a subpoena for John Bolton?
Mr. Chief Justice, members of the Senate, I think that's precisely the point. And the fact is that if, in fact, we are to go down that road of a witness or witnesses that had national, in the case of Ambassador Bolton, high-ranking NSA, this is an individual that's giving the president advice at the highest level. The Supreme Court's been very consistent on that. That's where privileges are at their highest level. The presumed privilege, actually, is what the Supreme Court has said. And in a situation like this, I think we're going down a road, if the Senate goes this road, of a lengthy proceeding with a lot more witnesses. And then I want to ask this question and just plant it as a thought. Is that going to be the new norm for impeachment? You put an impeachment together in a couple of weeks. We don't like what the president did. We get it through in a 2-day proceeding in front of the Judiciary Committee. We wrap it up and we send it up here and say, now go figure it out. Because that's what this is really becoming. That's what this actually is. So I think if we're looking at the institutional interests that are at stake here, this is a very dangerous precedent. Because what they're doing, what they're saying is basically, well, we have enough to prove our case. That's what Manager Schiff says, but not really. So we really need more evidence, not because we need it, because we want it. But we didn't want it bad enough when we were in the House, so we didn't get it. So now you issue the subpoena, and then let's duke it out in court and see what happens. Sounds like to me that this is, they're acting like this is some municipal traffic court proceeding. I remind everybody that we're talking about, under their articles of impeachment, they are requesting the removal of the President of the United States. So, they're already saying in the media that there are ongoing investigation. They're going to continue to investigate. So are we going to be doing this every 3 weeks? Every month except in the summer? There's an election months away. The people should have a right to vote. My colleague Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, said that. So when I look at all of this, whether it's the late need of witnesses after you said you proved your case, if it's how do privileges apply or not apply, Senator Schumer said we get anybody we want, we'd be here for a very, very long time. And that's not good for the United States.
I think we can all see what's going on here. And that is, if the House wants to call witnesses, if you want to hear from a single witness, if you want to hear what John Bolton has to say, we are going to make this endless. We, the president's lawyers, are going to make this endless. We promise you. We're going to want Adam Schiff to testify. We're going to want Joe Biden to testify. We're going to want Hunter Biden. We're going to want the whistleblower. We're going to want everyone in the world. If you dare, if you have the unmitigated temerity to want witnesses in a trial, we will make you pay for it with endless delay. The Senate will never be able to go back to its business. That's their argument. How dare the House assume there will be witnesses in a trial? Shouldn't the House have known when they undertook its investigation that the Senate was never going to allow witnesses? That this would be the first impeachment trial in the history of the Republic with no witnesses? So Mr. Sekulow wants me to testify. I'd like Mr. Sekulow to testify about his contacts with Mr. Parnas or Mr. Cipollone about the efforts to implement the president's fight on all subpoenas. I'd like to ask questions of the president and put him under oath. But we're not here to indulge in fantasy or distraction. We're here to talk about people with pertinent and probative evidence. And you know something? I trust the man behind me, sitting way up, who I can't see right now. But I trust him to make decisions about whether a witness is material or not, whether it's appropriate to out a whistleblower or not, whether a particular passage in a document is privileged or not. It's not going to take months of litigation, although that's what the President's counsel is threatening. They're doing the same thing to the Senate they did to the House, which is you try to investigate the president, you try to try the president, we will tie you and your entire chamber up in knots for weeks and months. And you know something? They will if you let them. You don't have to let them. You can subpoena John Bolton. You can allow the Chief Justice to make a determination in camera whether something is relevant, whether it deals with Ukraine or Venezuela, whether it's privileged or it isn't, whether it's the privilege is being misapplied to hide criminality or wrongdoing. We don't have to go up and down the courts. We've got a perfectly good Chief Justice sitting right behind me who can make these decisions in real time. So don't be thrown off by this claim, oh, if you even think about it, we are going to make you pay with delays like you've never seen. We're going to call witnesses that will turn this into a circus. It shouldn't be a circus. It should be a fair trial. You can't have a fair trial without witnesses. I think when I was asked that question before, I answered the affirmative when it meant the negative. You can't have a fair trial without witnesses. And you shouldn't presume that when a House impeaches, the Senate trials from now on will be witness-free, will be evidence-free. That's not what the founders intended. If it was, they would have made you the Court of Appeals, but they didn't. They made you the triers of fact. They expected you to hear for witness. They expected you to evaluate their credibility. Don't take my word for it about John Bolton. Look, I'm no fan of John Bolton, although I like him a little more than I used to. But you should hear from him. You should want to. Don't take General Kelly's view for it. Make up your own mind, whether you believe him or Mick Mulvaney, whether you believe John Bolton or the president. Make up your own mind. Yes, we proved our case, counsel. We proved it overwhelmingly. But you chose to contest the fact that the president withheld military aid to coerce an ally. You chose to contest it. You chose to make John Bolton's testimony relevant, pertinent. If you had stipulated the president did as he is charged, then you might make the argument that you're making here. But you haven't. You've contested it. And now you want to say, but the Senate shall not hear from this witness. That's not a fair trial. It's not even the appearance of fairness. You can't have a fair trial without basic fairness.
It is Thursday, the 30th of January of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, we had the question and answer period yesterday, and that was quite revealing, of course. Oh, did you know that John Roberts kept Rand Paul from asking a question because Rand Paul was trying to out the whistleblower by naming the whistleblower, and Roberts said he will not name the whistleblower. So that was one of the first balls and strikes where, a balls and strikes judge like Roberts actually called a foul ball on the home team as the first one. He's fairly loath to call foul balls on the home team now. We know that from, gutting the Voting Rights Act as a start. But he shut down Rand Paul, so that was quite illuminating. Will he take on the mantle as president of the Senate, which is really what his function is? The vice president sits in the Senate as the president of the Senate to decide a tie. So Roberts, of course, has a little bit more power by being Chief Justice than just the Vice President as President of the Senate. Let's be clear. He has intimated that he will not use it. He'd like to be a potted plant. He really would. He doesn't like being there. I heard that he is just offended by these politicians. You know what? Maybe you ought to get out of government then, Roberts. Why don't you step down and let someone, well, of course, that might be Kavanaugh, wouldn't it? That would be just like them to elevate Kavanaugh to Chief Justice. Oh, my God. Well, regardless, we know that the enabling acts will be voted on tomorrow, though it could be next week. But they will be voting not to acquit Donald Trump. No, they are voting on the enabling acts, and he will become more powerful than a king. They are already arguing powers for him that are far beyond a king. And they are arguing that because our Congress is turning into a parliament. I said way back in the Cold War that these Republicans were panderers. They didn't believe anything about fighting the Soviets. They wanted to use the Soviet model for their own devious means, and they have. Right up to the Soviet-style show trial. Now, I would have liked to see this go on beyond the election. There's nothing in the rules that says, actually, I think that it does not become a moot point if he is voted out of office. An impeachment is still an impeachment. So then maybe it changes and turns into a criminal trial rather than the political trial, the political statement that impeachment is. It was a little bit disheartening when I kept hearing the other side, the White House counsel, saying, you can't impeach this president. He's already impeached. What you're talking about is removing. But they are counting on the vast American voting public to not know anything. Now, they are correct about the people who vote for Donald Trump. They have no idea what the enabling acts are. They've never heard of that before. Enabling acts for Trump, that sounds like a good idea. Keep these damn liberal communists at bay. And they'll have no idea what they are parroting. They are that stupid. But I will argue that the great silent majority, the sleeping giant, when it stirs from its slumber, that slumber has been roused. We are already seeing it. But already, the polls are showing we want witnesses. And the polls are still showing, we'd like to have removal. And they're doing everything they can to usurp the will of the people. Now, we have to define people, first of all, because they may be correct when they say that we Democrats, we the liberal, we the great vast American public who want this impeachment, that we really aren't people. People are the ones with a lot of money who not only give it to Trump but kiss his rear. I'm cleaning it up just a little bit today. Don't worry. We'll devolve into crassness soon enough. So it's more than just kick the libs, though that's part of it because, the Trump deplorable voter is pretty darn stupid. Let's be clear. Please. There's no convincing them. They're a cult. And there's obviously a cult in the Senate, though I think it's a little bit different. I think that they are all bought off. They know that they are, let's just say that they know who their handler is. Okay? They know where their campaign coffers get filled from. We, on our side, by and large, turn that over to the FBI for investigation. They look at our FBI as an enemy of the state. Oh, let's get back to this conflation that Trump has about he being the people. He being the state. The Sun King. Though a little bit more powerful, a lot more powerful than the Sun King was. I'm not just talking about military might. I'm talking about actual enabling acts that give this fellow, Trump, power beyond historical compare. Well, I don't know. Maybe Ivan the Terrible would be up there. Maybe. The Trump voter, by and large, when they're interviewed, admit, yeah, we know this guy is corrupt as hell. We know he lies all the time, and he's going to really, my family are farmers, and they're out of their farm right now. But you know what? It's okay, because Trump is our payback. That's an actual quote from a Trump voter. Trump is his payback. And the question was, well, what payback for what? Payback for electing a black president twice. We are being taught a lesson. We were warned that if we elected Barack Obama, we would be made to pay a price. And this is the price we pay. How dare we? How dare we? Mike Flynn's sentencing has been pretty much neutered. We'll see if that judge goes along with the bar push. Yeah, it looks like Mike Flynn got a little help from the Bar Association, not the American Bar Association. We're talking about the Bill Bar Association. Though I have to say that the judge has pretty much organized this agreement, this plea agreement, this sentencing agreement, where it looks pretty much that Flynn has committed perjury. In whatever filing he files, he will have committed perjury in one aspect or more. Perjury is a crime. Actually, it's a felony when you lie in court. But, like Trump said, judges. Can you believe that? We have judges. What country does that? Yeah, well, a representative democracy, that's what it is. Oh, and before we get into the rest of the offerings here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, along with the amuse-bouches at the chef's table, before we get into that, I got to take exception with Dersh saying that we are not a democracy. They talk about a republic if you can keep it. He's not talking about the Constitution. He's talking about Ben Franklin being interviewed for a periodical. He was asked a question. He answered it. And by that, Dershowitz says, we're not a democracy. Because democracy is too close to Democrat. And they can't have that. And we fell into this morass of calling it a representative democratic republic. No, it is a representative democracy. So with Dershowitz, up is down, down is up. A crime is not a crime. The President of the United States is the state. We don't have to put up with this. And we might be able to wrest control of our elections in time to vote this mobster out. We might. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, of course, Adam Schiff fired back after Sekulow threatened that the impeachment trial would be put on a pike. You call a witness, we're going to call all these witnesses. Well, you know what? I want to hear from the Trump kids. As a start. We could drag this on for a while, and I'm just okay with it. On the rest of the menu, here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The House Democrats called for a $760 billion in infrastructure spending over 5 years to repair sagging roads and bridges. Bridges sometimes sag, and sometimes they just fall over. NASA is pulling the plug on the Spitzer Space Telescope after 16 years of scanning the universe with infrared eyes. And NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell was unable to say the Rooney Rule is not working, but he did admit the league needs to change its minority hiring policy. Yeah, they sometimes bring in a minority to interview. Sometimes. But it's set up where you'll be lucky if you get an assistant coaching job. Maybe we'll put you on the traveling scout team. Maybe. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Tokyo prosecutors issued an arrest warrant for Carlos Ghosn for illegally leaving the country, along with warrants for a former U.S. Special Forces soldier and another person suspected of smuggling the former Nissan Motor Company boss out of Japan. And the Mexican activist who fought to protect monarch butterflies has been found dead 2 weeks after he mysteriously disappeared. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. If you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link right there by the social media scroll. Fancy that. Well, Kelly Lincoln monitors the chat room, and we thank Kelly for doing so. If you would then please take a look to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. We hope that you will notice our Patreon link and click on it, and maybe become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, please. We really thank those who have been Patreons of Netroots Radio for all these many years. Well, first it was PayPal, but we kind of moved away from PayPal because you know PayPal. But thank you for following us from PayPal onto Patreon. If you out there who are not Patreons currently of Netroots Radio, if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink once a month and, well, buy us a coffee and send that money our way, we are able to stretch those dollars beyond compare because we're quantum mechanics when it comes to that. Oh, man, we're able to parse it down to smaller than a quark. Yeah, we use the strong and weak force to stretch those dollars to resist as the founders originally intended, and we thank you for your generosity for those who have been recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio. We would truly be unable to do this without you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam. Go ahead, follow me there. And I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, well, about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Also, you could follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And most importantly, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. YouTube. I'm a little peeved at YouTube right now. I often use Nicole Sandler for our news segment, and she is a licensed FCC DJ, and she stays within the confines of her music clips to less than 14 seconds, but apparently that's too much for YouTube. So they just deleted the whole show for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We'll see if Wednesday is okay. I don't know if she played a clip that is in disfavor. Apparently, fair use is not allowed on YouTube, apparently. So if you can't find it on YouTube, you can find it everywhere else on the web that you can find podcasts. All right? All right. Let's get into this first offering here of the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, did you know it's Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? And I know that I got into an argument that grits isn't really part of New Orleans. Well, yes, it is, because I've had plenty of fabulous grits. And you know what? They used milk, not chicken stock, not water, but milk. If you're going to honor the grit, you use milk. And they did that in New Orleans when I go there. Please, honor the grit. Okay, David Shepardson of Reuters brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. U.S. House Democrats unveiled a proposed $760 billion infrastructure spending bill over 5 years that aims to rebuild sagging roads and bridges and reduce carbon pollution. Do you notice how they added the 5 years there? Makes Trump think that, his term, because, he's going to be reelected in his mind. And Nancy's playing this, right? Look, you'll be able to say that for even beyond your normal term and into the beginning of your third term, and we'll come back for your third term and see if we can add some more money to the infrastructure bill. Nancy plays this guy like a drum. The proposal is intended to get Trump to return to the bargaining table. Trump campaigned in 2016 on boosting infrastructure spending by at least $1 billion over a decade, but focused first on tax cuts and health care reform after taking office. You know how this impeachment is really different than Bill Clinton's? Bill Clinton still did all the legislative work that a president's supposed to do. And you know what he didn't do? Continue conspiring to, lie to the whole American public. I don't know. Maybe he was still lying about getting BJs. Wouldn't anyone? But regardless, he didn't have a whole structure in his government in which he could go after his enemies, real and imagined. Back to the article. There's so many ways we can deal with the climate crisis by solving our congestion and infrastructure crisis, said Representative Peter DeFazio, who chairs the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Yes, that Peter DeFazio from my state of Oregon. In April, Trump and Democratic leaders agreed to spend $2 trillion on infrastructure without hashing out a way to pay for it. Trump thinks that he can just cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. Cut that. Trump abruptly canceled a follow-up meeting after criticizing congressional investigations because this guy can't keep two things in his head at once. The Democrats' plan calls for new spending on roads, bridges, rail, public transit, water, internet expansion, electric grids, aviation, and brownfield land that was possibly contaminated after previous industrial use. Democrats want to spend $329 billion over 5 years on surface transportation, with a focus on fixing the 47,000 structurally deficient U.S. bridges. They would also provide $1.5 billion to support the development of an electric vehicle charging network. Democrats said that they did not want to discuss how to pay for the improvements until they reached a deal with the White House, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said they would vote on a plan when we're ready. Marcia Dunn of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. NASA is pulling the plug on one of its great observatories, the Spitzer Space Telescope, after 16 years of scanning the universe with infrared eyes. If you could see what I've seen with your eyes. The end comes today, when ground controllers put the aging spacecraft into permanent hibernation. For years, Spitzer peered through the dusty clouds at untold stars and galaxies, uncovered a huge, nearly invisible ring around Saturn, and helped discover 7 Earth-sized planets around a nearby star. Spitzer's last observation was yesterday, Wednesday. Altogether, Spitzer observed 800,000 celestial targets and churned out more than 36 million raw images as part of the $1.4 billion mission. An estimated 4,000 scientists around the world took part in the observations and published nearly 9,000 studies, according to NASA. You have to be proud when you look back and say, look at the team that's operating Spitzer. Look at the team that's contributing to having all of this great science, said project manager Joseph Hunt. Designed to last just 2.5 to 5 years, the telescope got increasingly difficult to operate as it drifted farther behind Earth. It currently trails Earth by 165 million miles, while orbiting the Sun. Spitzer will continue to fall even further behind Earth, posing no threat to another spacecraft or anything else, officials said. Really? Although it would be great to be able to operate all of our telescopes forever, this is not possible, NASA's astrophysics director Paul Hertz said. NASA originally planned to decommission Spitzer a few years ago, but put off its demise as the James Webb Space Telescope, a vastly more elaborate infrared observatory, kept getting delayed. Webb's launch is now off until at least early next year. This week, the Government Accountability Office warned of further delays because of technical challenges. It had been costing NASA about $12 million a year lately to keep Spitzer going. And Hertz said with no guarantee Spitzer would last until Webb's launch, the decision was made to shut it down now. Launched in 2003, Spitzer was the last of NASA's 4 so-called great observatories. With its infrared instruments, it was able to sense heat coming off celestial objects like night vision goggles, said Susan Dodd, a former project manager who now oversees NASA's Deep Space Network at JPL. By seeing through dust, we're lifting the cosmic veil on the universe, Dodd said. Still sending back breathtaking pictures, the Hubble Space Telescope rocketed into orbit in 1990 to observe the cosmos' invisible and ultraviolet light. It will celebrate its 30th anniversary in April. And the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory was launched in 1991, but because of equipment failure, was destroyed in a fiery re-entry in 2000. And the Chandra X-ray Observatory is still working since its 1999 launch. Barry Wilner of the Associated Press brings us this final offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Stopping short of saying the Rooney Rule is not working, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell noted yesterday, Wednesday, that the league needs to change its minority hiring policy. Though the league requires teams to interview minority candidates, only 2 African Americans have been hired for 19 open head coaching sports over the past 3 years. The league has only 2 minority general managers among the 32 teams. Clearly, we are not where we want to be on this level, Goodell said at his annual Super Bowl news conference. We have a lot of work that has gone into not only the Rooney Rule, but our policy overall. It's clear we need to change and do something different. Well, how about hiring some coaches of color? Come on, how about that? Now, I know how it works. They have them come in, give the interview, pat them on the head, send them on their way. You've done your job now, haven't you, Mr. Owner? There's no reason to expect we're going to have different outcomes next year without those kinds of changes, and we've already begun engaging in those changes, not just with our diversity committee, not just with the Fritz Pollard Alliance, but others, and trying to figure out what steps we could take next that would lead to better outcomes. It's clear we're all committed to doing that, and we have to make those changes. Now, the Rooney Rule, which has been adopted by other leagues and businesses, calls for a minority candidate to be interviewed for head coaching and executive openings, such as general managers. Critics have said those interviews are often simply token responses to the rule, and the minority candidates are not seriously considered for those positions, do you think? Goodell also addressed negotiations between the NFL Players Association and the league on a new labor deal. The current 10-year contract runs out in March of 2021, and there is optimism on both fronts that a new deal could be finalized before this March, when the 2020 league year begins. They ought to take a little bit more effort and maybe start imposing fines on owners who are only giving token interviews. Well, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Used to be, when doctors prescribed a drug, they'd open up a book summarizing drugs and dosages, or go by memory for the common stuff. But nowadays,
now you can type in whatever it is, and then it's placing an order via the computer. So you type in an order of the name of the drug, and it will pre-populate everything.
Juan Carlos Montoya is an emergency medicine physician at San Francisco General Hospital. He also studies decision-making in healthcare. He says for an antibiotic, the default dose programmed into a doctor's computer might be pretty standard. But for pain, the number of opioids prescribed might vary a lot, depending on the patient and their type of pain.
What we wanted to look at is whether and to what extent the presets, the default settings that we had in the electronic medical record, influence provider prescribing.
Specifically, would lower defaults result in fewer opioids being prescribed? So Montoya's team systematically changed the recommended opioid pill number defaults in the computer systems of 2 hospitals in the San Francisco Bay Area during an 8-month period. Each hospital's pre-existing defaults were 12 and 20 pills, respectively. The researchers dialed in new defaults of 5, 10, 15, or an unspecified number of pills. Compared to doctors' prior prescribing habits, the new default settings resulted in fewer opioid pills prescribed overall, and fewer prescriptions exceeding the maximum recommendations by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
So this is suggestive that other hospitals, other emergency departments, clinics can change those settings and impact opioid prescribing pretty much immediately. It's the really low-cost intervention and can be done really quickly.
The results are in the Journal of the American Medical Association, Internal Medicine.
This is definitely not a silver bullet. The epidemic has a lot of different issues that need to be addressed, and this is one small tool that we can use to address it.
Still, it could be a useful prescription for physicians. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
With the Super Bowl upon us, it seems like a good time to ask, is there a color line in the National Football League?
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
2 data points. First, in the National Football League, there are 32 teams. Second, 3/4 of the players, 75%, are black. 32 teams means 32 general managers, only 6 of whom are black. 32 teams means 32 head coaches, only 4 of whom are black. 32 teams means 32 offensive coordinators, the best career path to a head coach's job, and only 2 of them are African Americans. 32 teams means 32 owners, only 2 of whom are people of color. The representation of people of color in top front office jobs is 11%. And the NFL, unfortunately, reflects corporate America as a whole, where among the 500 chief executives of the Fortune 500 companies, 0.8% are black. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination in employment on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, or sex. But more than 55 years after its passage, the promise of Title VII too often remains illusory.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1992. That was the day the gravediggers of Chicago ended their 43-day strike. The United Press International's headline declared, "The dead will rest in peace now that Chicago area gravediggers have reached a tentative contract." The gravediggers were part of Service Employees International Union Local 106. The strike started on December 20th, when workers at 4 Chicago area cemeteries walked off the job. At issue was wages, overtime, and health benefits. 22 other local cemeteries then locked out their workers. With the gravediggers on strike and locked out, more than 1,000 burials were delayed. The Chicago Rabbinical Society was able to get a court order for some of the burials to go forward due to Orthodox Jewish practice that requires burial within 24 hours. By the time the strike was settled, 300 burials were still waiting. Unless there is a labor dispute, grave digging is work that does not often find itself in the headlines. It is one of the many unsung types of labor that it takes to keep a big city like Chicago operating. In 1974, the famous radio host Studs Terkel published a book based on oral histories he had conducted with working people over the course of 3 years. The title of the book was simply Working. The book featured interviews that ranged from jazz musicians to pharmacists, farmers to welders. One of the most poignant interviews was with a gravedigger named Elmer Ruiz. Ruiz said, "I usually wear myself some black sunglasses. I never go to a funeral without sunglasses. It's a good idea because your eyes is the first thing that shows when you have a big emotion. Always these black sunglasses."
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Thursday, January 30th, 2020. I'm Sumari Ainsborough.
My name is Martha C. Morris from Liberia. I am a nurse by profession. I come from the National Health Workers Union of Liberia, Women Wing.
Ms. Morris is one of the organizers of a special project in Liberia aimed at stopping sexual harassment in the workplace. The project has been organized by Public Services International, the PSI, and Kommunal, the Municipal Workers Union in Sweden.
We have been working on the project since this 2019 that was supported by Kommunal through the connection of the PSI. And this project has been working on sexual harassment among the health workers, women on the work floor. Not just women, it was both men and women. And I'm here to admit that Liberian women have not known that sexual harassment was a serious issue to talk about. Even though they have been greatly affected, they have not been promoted or gotten the assignment that they deserve because bosses who were responsible to either promote you because you deserve it or assign you are the ones who have been the reasons of the sexual harassment. So since we started this project, the women on the work floor from the health workers and even the men that we included in the awareness we were creating, this have given a lot of women the courage to be able to stand up and talk about these challenges in the direction of sexual harassment. But before this project, women were so afraid to talk about it. It was even like a taboo that women could not talk about sexual harassment. So after the awareness, we have 15 counties. We call that chapters in Liberia where the National Health Workers Union are established. But because of the support from Kommunal, we have been able to work in 5 of the 15 counties. So we are still left with 10 more counties to work on. But we are very grateful that we have started. The 5 counties, we were able to create awareness with around 500 women and several other men. And we even established women's committee in the various workplaces that any case of sexual harassment on the workflow in that facility will be reported to that women committee, and the women committee will go through the process to channel that case to the next level.
Dimi Dirzrua is one of the men who has helped support the project against sexual harassment.
We feel that there are so many injustices that have been happening. Those things were happening where we didn't know because the environment we come from. So, but with the awareness that we have started with the support of Kommunal through PSI, most of our women are now brave and they can share their thoughts with us. And that is helping us because we feel that these women are somebody's sister, somebody's daughter, and somebody's wife. And so in a discharge of their duty, they must be doing it, they should do it with dignity and respect. And their bosses should not take advantage of them.
We saw the positive impact that this project has started. Now that our women in Liberia can stand up with confidence in themselves to talk about sexual harassment, which was not the case. We have only 2 unions in Liberia that is now organized. The first group of people to talk about sexual harassment in our country, that group is the National Health Workers Union of Liberia, Women Wing, and the CSUL Women Wing, which is the Civil Service Union of Liberia, Women Wing. So thank you very much to PSI. Thank God for Kommunal, and we hope and pray that we can work together so that we can have a greater impact on the future to come and the future generation.
You can find more information about the Sexual Harassment Project in Liberia by visiting the PSI's YouTube channel. I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of 57 to 60 degrees. Oh my, much warmer than yesterday. And we have areas of patchy fog early, overcast for most of the day. Winds will be light and variable all day and all night. And it looks like we'll have a little bit of drying out period, only drying out in the sense that we don't have large drops of water falling from the sky. But I was just out there, and that's more than foggy mist. So I'm just letting the weather underground know, because the weather station that's on the mammalian surface of my face says it's might still be raining, drizzling a bit. Though we are not expected to have any real rain until Saturday, which it will turn into a snowy, rainy mix, and even more so on Sunday. And then Monday, it looks like it'll be mostly rain, and then maybe a little bit of another supposed drying out period. Just pollen is rated at none. The air quality index is good at 23 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.31 inches. Visibility is down to 1.5 miles. And the relative humidity is at 95%. So much for drying out, huh? Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 54 and cloudy. Paris is 56 and cloudy. Rome is 57 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 38 and cloudy. Kabul is 28 with ever-present smoke from burning all their wood fires for heat and cooking, by the way. Hong Kong is 51 and clear. Tokyo is 49 and partly cloudy with another flood advisory. Sydney, Australia is 74 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 and cloudy with a wind advisory offshore and on the bay. And New York is a crisp 31 degrees Fahrenheit. But it's really sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Japanese authorities issued arrest warrants for a former U.S. Special Forces soldier and 2 other men on suspicion of smuggling former Nissan Motor Company boss Carlos Ghosn out of Japan. Warrants were issued for former U.S. Green Beret Michael Taylor and 2 other men, George-Antoine Zayak and Peter Taylor. A warrant was also issued for Ghosn for illegally leaving the country. Ghosn fled to Lebanon, his childhood home, at the end of last year while he was awaiting trial on charges of underreporting earnings, breach of trust, and misappropriation of company funds, all of which he denies. The arrest warrants come days after prosecutors searched the Tokyo office of Ghosn's former lawyer. Lebanon and Japan have about 40 days to decide whether Ghosn will be extradited to Japan or stand trial in Lebanon. The 2 countries have no extradition treaty, and Lebanon does not typically hand over its nationals. Ghosn's legal team is hoping to hold a trial in Lebanon, where the former auto executive has deep ties and hopes to clear his name. Oh, you mean you know a lot of judges there? Ghosn has struck out at what he has called Japan's unjust judicial system and said the alternative to fleeing would have been to spend the rest of his life languishing in Tokyo without a fair trial. Well, there's 2 types of justice, one for you and me, and one for the rarefied climes of the uber-rich.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Even more anonymous worker bees at Reuters, and who can blame them for being anonymous? I mean, come on. The reprisals that come out after reporters were reporting, it can be deadly to the reporter. Well, these anonymous worker bees are out of Reuters, and they bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Environmental activist Homero Gomez, who fought to protect the famed monarch butterfly, has been found dead in the western Mexican state of Michoacan 2 weeks after he disappeared, and as reported here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. It was not immediately clear how Gomez had died, though his disappearance sparked an outcry in an increasingly violent country where activists are routinely threatened, harmed, or even killed as a result of their work. The Human Rights State Commission in Michoacan had reported his disappearance on January 13th, and Commission official Meta Cardona said he was probably hurting the interests of people illegally logging in the area. Michoacan's Attorney General confirmed his death. One source at the state attorney's office, who declined to be named, told Reuters the cause of the death had not been determined, but that an initial review had found no signs of torture. Oh, my. Under the protection of their habitat, the reserve El Rosario Ocampo Michoacan, Gomez had become best known among Mexicans for posting mesmerizing photos and videos of the orange and black butterflies on social media. Millions of these butterflies make a 2,000-mile journey each year from Canada to winter in central Mexico's warmer weather. However, the insects are facing new challenges linked to extreme weather and changing habitat. Go ahead, say it, it's climate. The climate is impacting them, please. Plus, well, nicotinoids maybe as well. Michoacan is home to the country's largest monarch butterfly reserve, a World Heritage Site, as well as many rival gangs who battle to control smuggling routes through often arid terrain to the Pacific and the interior of the country. And as far as I know, those rival drug gangs are not World Heritage Site organizations, as far as I know. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio will broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and maybe the vote for the Enabling Acts. Maybe. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.